Good day, this is your word for the day from Anchor Church in Tunzini. And I'm here by this old bridge because I just love bridges. I'm fascinated with these bridges. And I always said to Dee, one day when I retire, if that should ever happen, I'd like to just travel the country and take pictures of bridges and maybe make a coffee table book of all the bridges in South Africa. Old bridges, new ones, little ones, it'd just be interesting. I'm always fascinated with them. But something I realized when I thought about bridges is that it doesn't matter how big the bridge is, or how small it is, or what it looks like, or how old it is. Whether it's got fancy architecture or whether it's just made out of logs, where it's situated, whether it's in a city or on the open road or on a farm, just crossing a little creek or something. There's one thing that bridges all have in common, and that is, the thing that they've got in common. They've got a common goal, and that is to get people safely from one side of whatever to the other side. Whether it's across a little stream, a raging river, a railway line, a gorge, just a ditch somewhere in the veld. But so they have this thing in common, is just to make sure that you get safely from this side to that side. Also find them quite faithful, because the bridge is always ready to be used by whoever comes along. Traveling would have been disastrous without bridges. And just like the Department of Roads use bridges to get people safely to their destination, God uses people, to make sure people get other people safely to their destination. Through the ages, God has been using people to accomplish His will on earth. And right through the Bible, it's very obvious that God operates by using people. He chose to use people, starting with Adam, Noah, Moses, Joshua, Saul, David, all different kings, prophets, disciples, the apostles. All of them were used by God to accomplish what He planned for us. To date, everything that God has accomplished on earth, He did by using people, all kinds of people. Not perfect people, because there are none. There are none perfect. There are no perfect people. Two examples in the Bible that I thought of that God obviously looked for someone was in Isaiah 6. God needed someone to take His message to the people. In Isaiah 6 verse 8 and 9, He says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord asking, whom shall I send as a messenger to this people? Who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am, send me." And He said, "Yes, go and say this to the people." So God needed somebody to carry His message. In Ezekiel 22 verse 30, God needed someone to stand in the gap, someone to be the bridge. He says, "I looked for someone who might rebuild the wall of righteousness that guards the land." I searched for someone to stand in the gap in the wall so that I would not have to destroy the land, but I found no one. In the New Testament, when it came to restoring our relationship with God, He sent His Son in human form to be used by Him. He was the only perfect man ever used on earth. And when Jesus completed His work on earth, He passed the responsibility on to men, to His disciples, to apostles, to the church as a whole. In other words, to us. He's passed it on to us. Jesus said in John 20 verse 21, He says, "As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you." And nothing has changed. Why? Because God never changes. And Jesus is the only bridge to the Father. He says in John 14 verse 6, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me." But on the other hand, we are called to be bridges to help people, others, to find Jesus, to get to Jesus. Romans 10:14 verse 15 says, 14 and 15 says, "But how can they call on Him to save them unless they believe in Him? And how can they believe in Him if they have never heard about Him? And how can they hear about Him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent?" That is why the scriptures say, "How beautiful are the feet of the messenger who brings good news." God still uses people to get people from one side to the other side, to the next point where He wants them to be, by praying, preaching, teaching, comforting, encouraging, reconciling, prophesying, laying on hands, going into the world and making disciples. God needs us for all this and for more. I wanted to leave this picture of you today with a bridge. I thought maybe every time you cross a bridge or every time you see a bridge somewhere, to look around, they're beautiful bridges. And you'll remember this message, because sometimes we feel inadequate, and sometimes we even feel not needed, especially when we compare ourselves with others. Some bridges don't get used all that often. Other bridges are very busy. But right where you are, that's where God placed you. To be the bridge, to connect somebody to Jesus. And Jesus is the only bridge that will connect them to the Father again. And remember, God does not call the equipped. He equips everyone who responds to His call. So this is the message that I wanted to leave with you today. To remember this and avail yourself. Be the bridge, and experience the blessing of being used by God to allow others to find their way to Jesus. Go in peace. Have a wonderful day. And allow God to work in you. Amen.